Okay, can everyone see the slides on? Okay. So, hi guys. Thank you all for coming once again. So, let's get started. So, first, what do you guys know about philosophy? In everyday life, people use philosophy to describe an opinion or an approach to something, and or a certain topic. And common preconceptions that people have about philosophy is that it's really hard and obscure, and it's kind of useless and difficult to get started on. And so today we're going to try and debunk this idea. So yeah, if you guys want to put in the chat any preconceptions about philosophy that you had, then yeah, feel free to do so. And moving on. Okay, so first, the roots of philosophy. What is philosophy? So the roots of philosophy, or what we consider Western philosophy, originate in Greece around 500 BC. And so what are some Western philosophers that you guys can think of? Like, who are the big three, for example? Does anyone want to unmute and tell? Okay, so the big three philosophers that we commonly think of is Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. And we'll talk about them in a little bit, okay? And around the same time as Greece, Buddhism and Jainism is also developing in Eastern Asia. And that is, those are two branches under Eastern philosophy. And today we're going to talk mostly about Western philosophy, since that's more broadly studied and that's like the general introduction that everyone gets to the basics in philosophy. Okay, so according to its roots, philosophy means love of wisdom. And in the early days, people considered the definition of philosophy to be the academic study of anything. So in fact, the first universities in the Western world, so Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum, which is actually a rival to Plato's Academy, all considered fields such as biology, physics, and even poetry to be philosophy. So basically, back then, philosophy was a very broad term to just describe the study of anything. And today, philosophy is more widely understood as a way of thinking about questions. So, for example, what kind of questions do we seek in philosophy? So that would be like, what is the world like? And what is the nature of reality? And is the world really just matter and energy? And so on. So it's basically trying to make sense of the world today. Okay, so yeah. So moving on, we're going to talk about the three main branches of philosophy, or I guess I should say four, but I often see ethics and aesthetics grouped under value theory just as one. So yeah. And so let's get into it. Okay, so first, ethics is the branch of philosophy that's concerned about why humans act the way that they do, or why they should act in a certain way. And essentially, it's debating right versus wrong. And I think it's the most practical in the literal sense out of all the branches of philosophy, because it's very often studied in law and yeah. So aesthetics is more about right or wrong in regards to beauty, or like what is considered beautiful. So Kant and Plato both talk a lot about aesthetics, actually. And yeah, and imitationalism is basically Plato's belief that art is always a representation of some object in real life, and it's basically some form of a copy. So that's just one branch of thought under aesthetics. Then moving on, our second main branch is metaphysics. So that's concerned with explaining like the nature of the world and how we came to be, and how the universe was created, which is actually more narrowly called cosmology, and ontology, which is the whole what is being and what does it mean to exist and everything. And yeah, so metaphysics is divided more narrowly into two branches. So cosmology is concerned with how the universe was created, and Thales of Miletus was actually one of the key philosophers that were pioneers in the movement of cosmology, and he theorized that water was the essence of the universe and created all matter. And here you can see a picture of what he imagined our world to actually be like. So it's like kind of covered in like water or like a sphere. Yeah. So yeah, that's what he thought. And the earth is a flat disk floating on a sea. That was his prototype of our world. Okay, and then moving on, ontology is concerned with debating like what is being and what does it mean to exist. Basically, it's debating reality. And Heidegger was actually a pioneer in the movement of ontology as a school under philosophy. So moving on to epistemology. That is concerned with examining what is knowledge and how do we find truth and what is true or false. So questions like what is knowledge, can we ever consider something to be absolutely true, would fall under this category. And yeah, so basically it's concerned with the nature of knowledge. And Descartes is one of the key philosophers involved with epistemology. So next are schools of thought. Okay, so schools of thought are basically ways that we categorize like viewpoints within each three main branches of philosophy. So here we have father of empiricism, Francis Bacon, and empiricism basically talks about how all knowledge must come from experience, and that was Francis Bacon's view under epistemology. And then contrasting that is rationalism, and Descartes, as we all know, is the founder of rationalism, and he thinks that we are all born with some innate knowledge and principles. And number 3, positivism is really similar to empiricism, except it has a focus on science, objective, and seeking human laws. So basically, when people started developing ways to conduct research in a more scientific manner, they started relying more on data and analytics. And basically, that's when they started arguing that it's very important to consider not just empirical evidence, but also like scientific evidence. So it's just more modern than empiricism, basically. Yeah. So the father of positivism is Auguste Comte, and he was also very involved with sociology. And that is why sociology often relies so much on data in their research. So yeah. And then lastly, we have existentialism, and that is concerned with what is the foundational meaning of man. And what main branch of philosophy would this fall under? Yeah, it would fall under metaphysics, basically. So we're trying to evaluate how, like, what is the meaning of existence and what does it mean to exist. So that's why it falls under the larger branch of metaphysics. And as I said earlier, Heidegger and Sartre are the two main philosophers involved with existentialism. So next, just briefly talking about why we study philosophy. So number 1, philosophy helps a lot with developing problem-solving skills because it fosters analytical and reasoning skills. And it also forces us to really organize our ideas and issues to really argue a certain premise that we're trying to advocate to like a group of people. And number two, it also broadens our perspective because we're forced to analyze both our own arguments and also evaluate that against other people's arguments because we're trying to prove ourselves right, you know? And then, so yeah, number three, research methods. Philosophy also teaches us how to interpret texts and read and get familiar with how to frame a hypothesis to basically lay out your philosophical foundation and argument. And then number four, persuasion. As we all know, philosophy has a lot to do with persuading your audience. Actually, it can be your audience or even just yourself on a certain view of a topic. So, clear construction of an argument, good example analysis, combined with ability to see others' perspectives, learning to adapt and argue your view is all under persuasion and related to philosophy. And as we all know, philosophy also has to do a lot with writing skills. A lot of the best philosophers are also very good writers. I would argue not everyone. Yeah, but basically a lot of writing is involved with philosophy. And then